Thanks for joining us again. Today we're going to be talking about seasons of life. How are you taking care of yourself during those seasons? So join us and we're going to get into it. You're listening to the Guthrie Family Podcast, a podcast where we encourage you in raising your kids and inspire you to grow in your relationships. We're your hosts. I'm Danny.
And I'm Haley. Join us as we love, encourage, and grow.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about seasons of life and how to take care of yourself during those seasons.
So there are different seasons that we go through depending on the ages of your children. And then we are basically going to address one of the questions that one of our friends asked about how do you take time to exercise, do your Bible study, eat right. Take time with your spouse, take time with your children, clean your house, work, do everything, and get everything done in a given day. And so we're here to kind of talk about that today. I think the short answer is you don't.
That's right.
So,
and it just depends on what season you're in.
Right.
And this podcast is obviously about raising children and relationships, but even in the relationships part, there may be some of you guys that's listening may not have children, or you may be planning on children. And, the seasons of life apply to you guys also. Right.
I mean, I remember before we had children, and right after I had kids, I thought, what in the heck did I do before I had kids?
But all our time.
Yeah. Yes, with all our time.
Yeah, we always felt like we were so busy. We were
felt
busy.
Like I was busy. My house was never clean, and at this point, I can't tell you why. But then when you have children, then you're constantly your attention is on the child. Obviously, you're trying to feed them, dress them. They're babies. You're just keeping them alive, and
right.
then
especially with your first.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then you're also just exhausted from being up at night feeding them and all that. And so during that season, what is it that you are able to do? And so a lot of times you have to set goals for yourself, and they need to be realistic. And a lot of that has to do with what we're going to talk about today with prioritizing. Then you get to where they're school aged and you're trying to get up and get everybody ready for school. And I know mornings are something that we are now really good and efficient at.
Right.
But we really had to fine tune it in order to get that way, because you've got to make everyone's lunches and everybody's got to get dressed, and you've got all the emotions that occur in the morning time. And then, it really, honestly, if you aren't setting your priorities as far as what you're doing that day, it's really hard to get everything together and get everything done. And by the time everybody goes to school, especially if you have to go straight to work from there, and you're like, did I get everything done?
Right.
I haven't exercised. I haven't eaten breakfast. Did I read my Bible today? That type of stuff. So.
Right. And it's awesome to it's also great to get into a habit of your morning routine. We've talked about morning routines before, right. And we'll link that video up here. But we've talked about routines before and how important it is to get into routines and create habits. And
right.
So we finally got to a point, like Haley said, that we have a morning routine for when the kids are going to school, and it's become a habit.
Right. Right. And so, it has evolved. And right now we're at an odd stage in that we have a 15-year-old and we have a 2-year-old. And so we have the no sleep, lack of exercise and nutrition.
That is difficult.
And then you've got the teenager that requires a lot of quality time, and it has to be very intentional, because with teenagers, they try to avoid that quality time with you sometimes, but then when they want it, and this is one of my friends, Christy, said, they're always going to want to talk to you at night, and that's so true. Nighttime seems to be the time when they want to come and have all these conversations with you, and you're really just tired, and you really want to just say, can we just talk about this another time, or in the morning, and that's not necessarily the best time for them, so you have to reprioritize that.
And I think that's more so with us, because our teenager, Zoe, she seems to avoid the evening time stuff as much as possible with all the little kids, because, just to be honest with you, the little kids are difficult. They're stressful, right. And it's difficult. And I think she tries to avoid that time by going up to her room, studying or whatever. It's kind of funny because she comes out of her cave right at 8 o'clock when everybody's in bed, the house gets quiet. She comes downstairs and it's like, hey, it's Zoe time. It's time to talk for 3 hours.
Right.
And Haley and I are exhausted and we're ready to go to bed at like 8:01.
Well, at that point, this is usually when we sit down and we read a book or we watch something or we have a conversation with each other. And so we have had to kind of redo our evening routine based on having a teenager. So now, and I say that, and of course she's not near as much trouble as the little kids on things, but it's just different, and it's just kind of reprioritizing our lives. We were in a stage at one point when everyone went to bed at 8, and so that was all our time, and that was really nice. But I mean, I'm really trying to enjoy this time too.
Yeah, speaking of seasons of life.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so, and then, you're also trying to teach them how to drive as teenagers. You're trying to, they've got friends to keep up with, and they're playing sports. And so there's all these things that you're trying to keep up with this age of children. And so teenagers bring their own problems with it. And people have always told me that we just wait till they get teenagers. When they're younger, you think, oh, this is so hard. When they get older and they can do things for themselves, it'll be easier. But that's not true.
I think one of the things that's with that is that, and this is going to sound probably terrible, but when they're younger, they don't have an opinion. Like you do what I say, and and you eat, you sleep, you play. Whereas teenagers, they're coming into their own. They have an opinion. And you need to let them have that opinion. There's still rules that they have to abide by, but they have an opinion, and it's more of a negotiation,
right?
And conversation more than just, hey, just do what I tell you to do.
Right.
It could be that way, but I don't think you're going to have a great relationship with your teenager if you do it that way.
Probably not.
Unless it's something that you absolutely have to lay the law down on.
There are things that have been really important that we've said that this is what we're going to do, and this is absolutely the rule.
Right. And if you're going to live in our house, you're going to do it this way.
Right.
You will do this, and you won't do that. But there's a lot of things that we give her the opportunity to make her own decisions on, and have a conversation and negotiation about.
So part of this is evaluating where you are in each season. And so your goals, of course, they may or may not change. Of course, your goals have to do with your relationships with your children, your relationships with your friends and your family, your relationship with God. You have to prioritize everything.
Your relationship
out.
With your husband.
Oh, yeah, and him too.
Speaking of prioritize, let's prioritize that correctly. Your relationship with God, your relationship with your spouse,
right?
Your relationship with your children, your ministry, whatever you're doing for God, and then your work. Okay. So now that we've got that correctly prioritized, then we can move forward.
Right. Okay. Whatever. But anyways, you're right. I was not putting it in priorities. So with this, we like to use, or what we would want to present is more of a theory of Stephen Covey, which is called putting first things first. Right. And I think this is a brilliant, of course, his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is a brilliant book anyway. But the techniques that he put in here are really, really good about helping you to prioritize and to decide what is the most important thing. And like I said, there's going to be different things that are going to be important at different stages of your life.
Right.
And so you have to discover that for yourself. So you basically are writing down what are my goals right now? What is it that I want to accomplish? So that you know that there are things that are, and he puts in there, urgent and important. So the interesting thing about the urgent problems were crises, pressing problems, and deadline-driven projects. So those are your urgent, and then you have your important, which are not urgent, but they are important, and it's prevention, relationship building, planning, blah blah blah, recreation. Okay.
He said blah blah blah.
Yeah. Well, that's me going, through it, etc.
Etc.
And so yeah. And so what he talks about in here is if you only focus on the urgent, then you're constantly basically chasing your tail.
Right.
Because you're only operating in a crisis. And so what I think about with this is like when we have people over, and if you don't clean your house or keep your house clean, and you decide I'm going to have somebody over, and that's the only time you ever clean your house.
Well, for a lot of women, there's 2 different types of my house is clean.
Right.
There's my house is clean and we're living there, and my house is clean for company come over. So There's 2 different types of cleanliness.
Well, and for some people, they don't really clean until people come over. Right. And that's a pretty common thing I hear among women. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but you're working in a crisis there. So what he's saying is that's not the best way to do things. Managing is much better than working in a crisis. And that
also goes along with, I know we're not there yet, but that also goes along with fitness. Obviously, we're not exactly where we want to be as far as fitness goes, but we have been there. And we are, getting
during a different season.
During a different season. That's right. But it is really difficult to get to the point that you want to get to, but it's really easy to maintain it when you're there.
Right.
So you have to struggle and do a lot to get to that point that you want to be at. And it's really, really difficult and hard. But once you get to that point, you can do about, well, percentage wise, I don't know, but I'm just going to say you're going to do about half or a third of what you used to do to get there to maintain it.
Right. Because you also are in a habit or a routine. That's the biggest thing, is coming up with your habit or routine. And so he said, if you focus on what is important, you're able to have more initiative and be more proactive. And that's really true.
Right.
And or he says that you have to say no to some things. And we've talked about that in the past as well, is you can't say yes to everything that people want you to do. You have to really prioritize. And so he said something I think is wonderful. It says, this is his quote, is the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities.
Right.
And I think that's a profound statement for me, because a lot of times I do look at my schedule and think, how can I fit this here and fit this here? Whereas you should see, what are my priorities, and let me plug those in, and then everything else is going to fit on the other in any other part of your time.
And in the book, we brought this up too, but in the book, 6 Months to Six Figures, one of the things that he talks about, and we've talked about it a lot actually on the podcast, is making a to-do list and a don't-do list. Mm-hmm. And it's very similar to this. You got to figure out what your priorities are and make a list about what you're going to do. And some of that stuff, like you said, you have to cut out.
Right. And so basically what you're needing to do is to write down your goals, write down how you can achieve them, and write these down in daily and weekly goals.
Right.
And we kind of already addressed this. So let's talk about seasons of life. So right now where we are, my number one goal is to read my Bible every day. And the reason that is so important to me is because if I don't read my Bible, I am not the same person that I am without the Holy Spirit. It just, I don't have my armor on, and I'm not always the best person.
And the Bible talks about putting on the armor of God and putting on Christ daily.
Right.
That we have to, each and every day, we have to put on Christ and do that daily. It's not, a lot of people think that, hey, once you're saved, it's all over. That's it. You're getting into heaven, and, you have the Holy Spirit with you the whole time. You can suppress the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And so you got to get into the Word on a daily basis.
I just think people can fake it better than I can. I'm not a faker. I am who I am, pretty much. And so I really have to make sure that's my first priority.
So one of the things I want to bring up as we're talking about seasons of life is obviously the Bible talks about, actually also in Ecclesiastes, that there's nothing new under the sun. And seasons of life, there's nothing, that's not new either.
Right.
So, but Ecclesiastes 3:1-15 talks about the seasons of life. And this is what it says. This is the ESV. It says, "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance." Of course, the Baptists don't like the time to dance. No, I'm just kidding.
That's not true.
I'm just kidding. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. So biblically, like we've been talking about, there's a season for everything and there's a time for everything. So, you may be in a season, a tough season, but just know that you're going to get through it. It's just a time, it's just a season, and things will get better.
Right. You may not have your dream life right now, but then there's also a lot to be said about enjoying the moment that you're in and living your life in that moment. So the important thing is to figure out, like I said, what is most important to you. So things like exercise are also very important to a lot of people. Now, I have put that on the back burner.
Right.
Because when you're raising, he's poking my belly for those just listening. So I have been in great shape in my life several times. Well, actually, most of my life.
Yes.
But when I received my 7th baby, that exercise just kind of fell to the wayside. Part of it was fatigue, my schedule and work, and so I had to choose what was most important. And at that point in time, exercise just wasn't. It wasn't the most important thing. Now there are going to be times times when there is a time now when I am starting to exercise again. It's not something that I knew I could not put that off forever. I don't want to be the person who never has time to exercise, because obviously that's not what I want to look like. That's not who I want to be. I don't want to feel that way. But for that time, that was what I had to do. There's some things, some of this is easier for me because I don't care about getting my nails done. I don't go and get my hair done much, as most people can see. So some of that is easier for me and it's harder for others, and you have to figure out what is important to you. So that stuff isn't important, and I've been able to throw off the wayside.
And one of the things for me that's been kind of difficult is, as most of you guys know, I don't know if we talked about it on this podcast or not, but my Danny Guthrie channel, I've talked a little bit about it, is jiu-jitsu. I started taking jiu-jitsu in August of 2016, and I've been in and out of jiu-jitsu over the years with, injuries. I would be out for a while and then back in there. And right now, we're just, the past couple of months has been extremely busy, and our daughter had surgery, and we're just in a very short season, I believe it is, but we're still in a season and in a time to where that is something I love to do. It takes a lot of stress off of me. I can just go. There's a great group of guys there that we roll with and have a great time, and that's something I enjoy to do. And I just hadn't been able to do it because of the season that we're in. But the great thing about it is that I understand that I'm in a season and it will be over. It'll come to an end, and I'll begin a new season. And I can get back to jiu-jitsu and get back onto that schedule. And this season is not forever. And so that's one of the things Haley and I has talked about that I don't think we said yet is be sure that you always hear people say, hey, enjoy the journey. And then they get into a tough season and then they start hating life.
Right.
But you've got to enjoy the journey because all the seasons are just temporary.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And that is something that we have learned, I guess, because not that we're old, but we are older, and we're
getting there.
But that is something that I didn't know when I was younger, and I wished I would have realized that your seasons, and especially with your kids, they're so short. And so this is something that's very, very temporary. And so as long as you can realize that, like after I think I had my 6th or 7th child, I realized, and I didn't have her, I received her, but I realized that how hard it was, and you're just struggling and no sleep. And I kept saying, well, this is going to end at some point in time.
It's just for a time.
This is just a short period of time. And once I had that in my mind, it made that so much easier for me to be able to just think, okay, I'm going to get sleep in about a year, so I can handle this. I can do anything for a short period of time. And so that was helpful to us. And so we kind of just want to encourage y'all that, where you are right now is not necessarily where you'll be a year from now or even 6 months from now.
It's all temporary. If you're a little bit overweight, hey, it can be temporary.
Right.
You set down plans, make goals, and you work those plans out. And where you are now is going to be temporary.
Right.
Your financial situation is going to be temporary. Your health is going to be, it's temporary. It can always get better if you make plans and goals for it to get better and act on those plans and goals. But just
it can always get worse.
It can
if you don't make plans and goals. That's what we want to, that's why we want you to continue to reevaluate the situation.
Right. And our pastor actually had a sermon a while back that was wonderful, and I'm not going to do it justice here. I'm not even going to try, but one of the things that he was talking about is from the time that your child's born to the time that your child turns 18, put a marble in a jar, and for every week, and every week take a marble out, and you begin to see how quickly just time goes by with your kids, and you don't have a lot of time with your children to raise them and teach them and help them to grow. So you really need to be proactive now and
intentional. The word is intentional for the year.
Yeah, intentional. Be very intentional. Take action. And one of the things that the book talks about that Haley's getting into with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is people who are reactive and people who are proactive. And we really want to encourage you to be very proactive with raising your children and spending time with your children and your health.
Right. And spending time doing things for yourself that is important, that's going to make you a better parent and a better person. And sometimes it is allowing other people into your life, as far as saying yes to things, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right.
Because your kids do need to see you serving as well. And so this is all, but again, it goes back to the seasons that you're in, and a lot of times allowing your children to participate in serving other people. So, because our life is about others. So when I talk about saying no, I don't mean you got to say no to everything, but you do have to remember, what is the most important thing right now? And what am I trying to do? And it's not child-centered, it's God-centered.
Right.
And that's what the important thing is saying no when it doesn't line up with what God's asked you to do and what your purpose is in life.
Yeah, we saw Haley actually made a repost on Facebook about a lady who was in foster care who adopted her child's sibling. And what I thought was neat about that is one of the things that she put in that post is that people always ask her, how do you do it? And it's kind of funny because it's one of the same questions that we always get. People say, how do you do it? We've talked about that before. But it's the number one thing is knowing that God's called you to do something, and knowing that you're in the will of God doing what you're doing, and he will take you through anything.
Right.
So being very clear about God's purpose for your life, which is, we've talked about that before also, number one purpose for your life is that you glorify God in everything that you do. It be work or exercise or whatever, that you're glorifying God in that. And, for us, it's our daily lives. It's our daily walk.
Right.
But also, he called us to foster these kids. It's kind of funny. I'll bring this up real quick. My daughter, Molly, I hadn't even talked to Haley about this, but Molly and I were talking about the other day, and she was talking about the time that I was in the military for a short period of time. And, she was asking about how that went and all. And I said, well, if I would have stayed in the military, you might not even exist. I said, because doing some of the things that I was planning on doing, more than likely I wouldn't have come back home. I would have never have met Haley. I would have probably been somewhere else. And I said, it's very interesting how God, even at that point, knew what was best for me, even though I was struggling with some things and went through some really, really tough times then. I was in a season, and I went through some really, really tough time then. But because of the decisions, and they wasn't good decisions, but because of the decisions that I made then, that I am where I am now with my family and my wife and my children. And if it wouldn't have been for those bad decisions that God was also sovereign in, we wouldn't have even fostered the children that we're fostering.
Right.
So I say all that to say, sometimes don't forget about your past. Take what's good from your past, the hard things that you went through, and take the good out of it. And that your past is what's made you and put you where you are today. So learn from your past. Don't just shut it out and shut it up. Some of it's very difficult. I get it, guys. I know, but deal with it, get over it, and move forward.
And also, I would encourage you, don't dwell on what's going on in your life that's negative right now, and dwell and wallow in, well, I can't do this and I can't do this. Really live in what you can do and what's positive in your life at that time. And I don't mean that in a hokey way. I really mean there's so much in your life that you have right now to be grateful for and thankful for. And when you're living that life and you're not wallowing in the what ifs and but I can't right now, then that creates in your life a lot of negativity. It keeps you from growing.
Right.
So I encourage you not to wallow, but to live your best life that you can live right now. And to really be proactive, be intentional in your life and your goals, so that you can accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, and just be patient with yourself and give yourself some grace, because this is just a season of life.
So go check us out at GuthrieFamily.blog and sign up for our emails at the bottom of any of one of our posts. And in those emails, we'll share a little bit more about our personal lives with you guys, and we'll see you next time.